Hello, welcome to the Gateway Church podcast. I'm Liam Flint, and on today's episode, we're forecasting forward slightly to the time when churches will begin that long drive back towards some form of normality. And we're going to be having a look at some of the pitfalls that we need to watch out for on the way, one of which is division, the key word. Now, joining myself and Matthew Hosier, who's pastor here at Gateway Church, is another pastor, and the man who's inspired this topic with his recent article that he's written for the Gospel Coaltion, and that is Brett McCracken. Brett, welcome. So good to have you.
Thanks so much. It's great to be with you guys.
Absolute pleasure. Brett, could you just fire off for us 30 seconds who you are, where you're based and what you do, just so everybody knows what you're about?
So I'm Brett McCracken. I am a journalist by profession. I am a senior editor for the Gospel Coaltion, which is a big Christian website. And I work from home normally. So all of us editors at the Gospel Coalition just work from where we live. So I'm based in Southern California, and I'm married. I have one toddler, 1-year-old boy, and then another one on the way coming in July. So our house is lively already during quarantine. We're all at home working and living, and we're going to get even livelier in the next few months with another baby on the way. I'm also an elder at Southlands Church, which is part of the Advanced Network church here in Southern California.
Amazing. So how's lockdown been for you then with a toddler? Has it been fun?
You know, it has. I think there's been really sweet elements to it, of course, just being all together at home and having more quality time with my son and with my wife. You know, she's normally in an office working full-time, and she's been working full-time at home. And as I said, I'm used to being at home and working. That's just my normal. So that hasn't been an adjustment, but it has been an adjustment to have the whole family, you know, at home and trying to work and trying to get things done. So it's been tricky. My wife and I have had to do like shifts of one of us working while the other one manages our son, Chet. But we've, 2 months in, we've kind of found our groove, I think, with the rhythms. So we're making it work.
And Matt, people won't be able to see this, but you are currently sat in your garage. So does that tell us all we need to know about how you're finding lockdown?
I'm sat in my garage with my laptop balanced on a plank suspended between two bikes, and I'm sitting on a broken chair, so everything could collapse at literally any moment. But Grace is on a work call in the front room, and one of my kids is busy in the kitchen and back room. And finding a space which is female free, always a challenge in this house. So I've retreated to my garage. I'm very happy, surrounded by my bikes and things. So
right.
Yeah,
it's my happy place.
It looks like a true apocalyptic image, like you're hungry.
Yeah, I'm storing up
apocalypse.
A millennium's worth of canned beans in here so I can survive the zombie apocalypse.
Right. Yeah. Maybe see some toilet paper on the shelf.
Who needs Montana when you've got a garage and pool?
Exactly.
Yeah, we're all having to get creative in these times. Now, Brett, it's great to have you on. The article you wrote recently titled "Church, Don't Let Coronavirus Divide You." Some people will have read that. Some people listening here won't have read that. It was for Gospel Coalition. Could you just tell us in brief why you wrote that article in the first place and what your heart behind it was?
Yeah, so in America, churches are starting to reopen. I know in the UK and other parts of the world, maybe that's not happening yet, but and in certain states like California, where I live, it's not really happening yet, but happening soon. So churches are just preparing for that and having the conversations about how do we reopen. And I've just observed in our own experience at Southlands as elders kind of debating, hashing this out. It's been fraught with a lot of disagreement and kind of everyone has opinions. And it just struck me that, we're probably a microcosm of the larger church, our larger congregation, which is all over the map with their opinions about this. And our church is a microcosm of the world in general. And I've just also noticed that it seems like the coronavirus pandemic in the early weeks and months felt like a unifying moment for the world. Like we're all kind of dealing with this. We're all in this together. But in the last month and really in the last weeks, it seems like it's accelerated. It seems like it's turned to divisiveness. We've now moved past that initial shock, and now it's just something to argue about. And we're already a culture, I think, prone to argument and division. And this is just the latest excuse to yell at each other about whatever. So we've turned coronavirus into a political debate in the U.S. No big surprise. Everything eventually turns into a political debate. And it's just grieved me to see the church follow that, and to see members of our church kind of taking sides and debating it on social media. So I just really felt burdened as an elder, as a pastor, to shepherd our church, at least, to do the best that we can to be different than the culture, and to actually model unity in a time of, intense division.
Can you relate to that, Matt? Even for us over here, slightly different context.
I think the article is brilliant. I guess we'll put a link on this, won't we? So people can find it if they haven't seen it already. I know it's getting a huge number of hits because it is so helpful and insightful. And yeah, so I know it's different in the States and from state to state, as Brett has said, here in the UK, where we're waiting until possibly after the 4th of July, we might be able to have some kind of physical gathering, but we'll still be very small. And locally, we're working that through here, what that looks like and how we do that. And as elders, trying to find a way towards some kind of resolution, and then needing to communicate that to the church. It's going to be complex, what are the results. But yeah, I feel that there obviously is a wide range of opinions. As Brett says in the article, we've all become experts. And part of the problem is even the experts don't really know what's going on. You see that with the professional epidemiologists who are arguing about it, because epidemiology isn't physics. It's not an exact science. It's speculative to a large degree. So we're all arguing about things that we don't really know. And we have different, I'm afflicted with optimism when it comes to world events generally. I'm 50 next month, and on every kind of big scale thing, every year of my life has been a better year globally. I'm optimistic about the state of the world in that sense. So I'd be somebody who would be much more skeptical about lockdown and lots of other stuff. But I've got other people in my team who would be very different from that, much more cautious, and would have probably good reason for that, just as I've got reasons for some of my more optimistic approach. So yeah, I feel that tension myself, and I found Brett's article so helpful in kind of a corrective to me, and thinking about how we handle the next 6 months in a way which is going to help hopefully keep us together rather than smashing us apart.
Yeah, I think what you said about even the experts don't know, that's been a big takeaway for me, in terms of with every passing week, the experts, quote unquote, seem to change their recommendations and their projections, and it just shows that this is a truly unknowable, the complexity of this disease and how it affects us and what the long range impact will be is something we can't know now. And on one hand, I think that should make us a little bit less harsh to our leaders, because we have to put ourselves in their shoes. They don't know what to do. They're getting so many opinions in their ear from every possible point of view. So as much as I disagree, for example, with our California governor, who tends to be very, just restrictive, more so than other states, I get it. I understand that he's in an incredibly complex position. And so I think for pastors too, I would love for congregations to have that sense of look, this is hard for every leader at every level, and they're all just trying to figure it out, and we don't know. And anyone who pretends to know what the exact right course of action is, whether it's on a government level or on a church leadership level, is kidding themselves. And so we just all have to give each other a bit more grace and a bit more of the benefit of the doubt, I think.
You talked in your post, Brett, about humility. Could you just expand on that a little bit and how that applies in this situation?
Yeah. I mean, I think that it speaks to that whole thing about we don't really know. We shouldn't have crazy levels of confidence with anything that whatever our opinions are, we need to hold loosely, because we don't know. And so I think intellectual humility is always a good virtue to cultivate as people, as Christians especially, but especially in this climate where knowledge, information, you can find arguments for anything you want to believe, and that's a bigger problem with our society that predates coronavirus, just the crisis of epistemology, and being able to kind of find quote unquote alternative facts to back up whatever your opinion is. We're seeing the coronavirus amplify that. And so as Christians, I think just one step we can take is just to wield our opinions more gently and not so abrasively, and just be quicker to listen, slower to speak, as James calls us to do, and slower to become angry, which we live in a culture that's quick to become angry. And so that's just one small thing we can do, and just to put others, the interests of others before our own, as Paul calls us to do in Philippians 2, in that beautiful passage on humility. Consider the interests of others. Just in your day-to-day life as a church, if we all just thought through that, how can we consider the interests of others? So one thing I mentioned in the article is, when we do come back together again as churches, there's going to be lots of changes. For example, requiring masks and social distance. And there's going to be some people who don't like that, and believe it's not necessary. And, they just hate it. They don't want to wear masks at church. But I think that a practical way to kind of consider others and the interests of others before your own is to wear a mask anyway. Love your neighbor by honoring, the weakest person in your midst, to kind of reference Romans 14 and what Paul says about the weaker and stronger brother. So there's going to be lots of practical ways as a church when we start gathering again that we can show that sacrificial, humble, honoring love to one another, even if it means we don't do our ideal or what we believe is appropriate.
With both of you being in leadership, how much do you have to think about these things? How much of your brain is already going towards when we meet again in that first meeting versus the immediate needs of now? Because it must be tough, right? And you've got to pastor right now where people are at, but you've also got to be ahead of the game because we need to move back to normal church. So yeah, how is that going for both of you?
Yeah, I'd love to hear what Matt says, but I mean, for us, it's as elders at Southlands, it is a both and, because our congregation, they're a lot of them are really struggling mentally and emotionally right now, spiritually, and so there's that immediate pastoral need, but then there's this crazy complex logistical thing that we've got to hash out about, how do we regather? What does that look like? What does it look like for small groups to gather again? What's our guidance for that? There are so many moving pieces. And so for pastors right now everywhere, this is a very complex season that we don't really have a playbook for. So yeah, I would love to hear you, Matt, what it's looking like for the elders.
Well, it's the same, that we've been busy in the response phase, and we're now starting to think about the recovery phase, the next 6 months, and the complexity of that, and working out. So big picture stuff, when do we start gathering, how does that look, and then the small detail in that, in terms of how many people you have in a room, how you do cleaning between meetings, all that kind of stuff. It's massively complex. So we've got this kind of window of the next few weeks up to the 4th of July, which, as I say, is when we think, well, the government's indicated if things stay on track, there'll be another easing of restrictions. So we've got between now and then to where we're wrestling with all those kind of detailed questions, but it is massively complex. And I think kind of is what you're saying about humility, that I think trying to remember that actually everybody is concerned about preserving life. And people who are cautious are concerned that a further outbreak of the virus will cost lives, and those who are more frustrated with the lockdown are concerned that the lockdown itself is jeopardizing life in terms of effects on physical and mental health. So I think I think to hold that with humility, to recognize that in one another, we're all after the same thing. There probably is no good outcome, that it's going to cost either way. And so we're dealing with that cost and that complexity as churches, that whatever we do will be costly, will be complex, and it won't be an ideal outcome. We're not going to be back into an ideal situation anytime soon. And that's a painful place to be. So I think as pastors, dealing with the practicalities of that and being as wise as we possibly can and as detailed as we possibly can, but also to help our people and help ourselves to lament in it, because all the way through we're going to be experiencing loss. So appropriate lament, I think, is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I was also thinking this week about just pastorally, when we do come back together, there's going to be so many new wounds that people carry from this. And like, how are pastors going to walk with people through that? Whether it's kind of addictions that have flared up during coronavirus, or just depression, economic fallout. So as if the logistical like challenge of regathering was not enough, like I think pastorally, the task is going to be huge for shepherds with their flocks.
Yeah, I'm thinking about doing a teaching series in July called Out of the Wilderness, talking about that complexity. I think the story of the people of Israel coming out of Egypt into the wilderness and then into the promised land. What you see is actually they get to the promised land and it's not everything solved. Actually, life becomes more complex. Moses isn't there anymore, then Joshua dies, and suddenly they're trying to work out, how do we live in this land? How do we do life as the tribes together? And rather than entering utopia, they've entered the promised land, but it's become far more complex than it was as slaves in Egypt, or wandering in the wilderness with Moses to guide them. And I think in our context, it's going to be like that we'll come out of the immediate crisis of coronavirus, but the pastoral complexity, I think, will be multiplied. So yeah, lots of work for us to do.
Yeah, plenty of work.
Plenty of work, but lots of opportunity too, I think. And that's a whole other conversation we could have about like the fruit, what is God doing in this, and how is the church going to emerge stronger? And I think it's maybe too early to speculate about that, but I do hope and pray that there is, this season, like any difficult season, any season of suffering, there's great potential for growth. And I think that there's going to be some healthy changes and healthy adaptation. And I pray that the church globally emerges stronger.
Yeah, I think that's a key point to really grab onto, and you make notes of that, Brett, in your article as well, that actually if we do get this right, and you've called churches to lead from the front, lead the rest of society, take them with us, and like you said, there's going to be so many people who are wanting to get on alpha courses or to know more, or they'll have lost loved ones and they're looking for meaning. So if we do play this right, digitally we'll be more inept, won't we, for being online. We'll actually be able to reach people in a big way. So as pastors, there must be slight optimism there in thinking we could have a lot of people through our doors in those early days.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that is the, my optimistic take is that that's going to happen. And we're already seeing alpha. We're doing a Zoom alpha at Southlands, and it's going really well. And we're seeing some great energy there. So I think there is going to be a spiritual hunger, just like after 9/11, at least in America, there was kind of an uptick in church attendance, and we'll see how it goes. It's a different situation, of course, with, post coronavirus. I don't know that the masses are going to be super excited to flock to a physical church, but spiritually, I think there's going to be an increase in hunger. And especially if the witness of the church in this season is one that is the aroma of Christ rather than a stench of ugliness, because and that's why I think the unity piece is so important in a culture of division, when everyone is just sick of how toxic the internet discourse is and social media. If Christians can model something different, and if we can have a public witness that is one of unity and sacrificial service towards one another, towards our community, I think that's a great apologetic for the gospel, and something that will make people more open to receiving, the good news. So, yeah, I mean, unity is always one of the gospel's greatest apologetics. Think about Paul and how he hammered home unity in the epistles, Jew and Gentile coming together, different classes, different cultures. And so we should be striving for unity more than ever, but it's hard in these intense, divisive times that we live in.
I mean, in your setting, it's so polarized politically, isn't it, between Republican and Democrat? And in our context, we had the huge polarizing thing of Brexit, which went very quiet. when coronavirus broke out. But I think even in terms of some of the kind of split over coronavirus and how to approach it, you're almost seeing those Brexit positions being assumed again of the two sides, and people on one side are tending to take one position. So for us in the church not to fall into that is vital. The thing I've been really kind of the phrase I've been led to the last few days and praying about is that God is doing a hidden work in us. And my prayer is that God really is in the church and in our own lives as we're hidden away in our houses at this time. He's pruning us and planting things. You prune fruit trees in the winter in order for them to come into flower in the spring, and you plant seeds under the soil in order for them to then come to life and bear a harvest. And yes, my prayer is that at this time God's doing that pruning and planting work, which will result in fruit and harvest further down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's fair to say, in my mind anyway, I think quite a few potential problems that could come our way as churches is the stem of it could be anxiety. And of course, lots of people will be feeling that as we meet again. And Brett, you mentioned the word patience a lot as another one of your key words there. You said, some people may not be ready to come back to church. Some people may think this is not safe. And people who do go need to be loving, accepting, and patient. So is that something that you would say, guys, we need to take that seriously?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, patience is something we're all having to learn in this coronavirus lockdown, because I think it's going on longer than any of us thought or hoped. But yeah, for churches especially, we need to exercise patience with so many things, with our leaders and decisions that they're making, and a timeline that maybe some of us wish was going faster. Patience with one another and the convictions that we hold and the decisions we come to as individuals and families. I really do hope that when we start gathering, and inevitably a certain portion of the church isn't going to gather because they don't feel comfortable. Maybe they have immunity issues or health issues, or even in my case, my wife being pregnant, she's not super comfortable like coming back to church before the baby's born, because the science is unclear on how the disease affects pregnant women. So we might, even as an elder at my church, we might choose to keep watching online for a couple more weeks than we have to, until the baby comes. So I just pray that we'll honor those decisions as a church, and we'll find ways to serve each other in that, and not to make anyone feel like they're, I don't know, just weak or cowardly for making a decision. Or on the other hand, if you're more cautious and you stay at home, don't view the people that do meet together as foolish and rash. So yeah, just give each other the benefit of the doubt, honor each other in our convictions, and strive to maintain the bonds of unity.
That's good.
And just on behalf of everyone who's listening to this, obviously there'll be so many congregations represented. How can we, as people who come to church, best be praying for you guys and also the leadership teams, all of you at the sharp end, as you make decisions about what's best for the church over these next weeks? I mean, for both of you, what would be really helpful? How can we best be praying for our leadership?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think just wisdom. I mean, wisdom. I read an article recently that talked about how we need wisdom now rather than expertise, and I think that's so true. Like every expert, will say what they have to say for their particular area of expertise, whether they're an economist or an epidemiologist or an education specialist. But a wise person takes all of those things into account and synthesizes them and makes the best decision out of oftentimes competing truths and competing goods. And it's choosing between multiple good things. And so that's the position that I think church leaders find themselves in. That's the position politicians find themselves in. So I would just ask that Christians everywhere pray for their pastors, pray for their leaders of their church to just have wisdom, supernatural wisdom that isn't of the flesh, that isn't based on our own, political leanings or whatever, but is based on godly wisdom. So that's what we need right now.
Yeah, I'd push that kind of upwards as well in terms of praying for earthly authorities.
Yeah.
That I think having to make these kind of decisions on a very small scale in our context, it gives me real gratitude that I'm not in the position of a president or prime minister at this time, with them having to think about these things at a national level, just so difficult. So to pray for them in it, pray for wisdom for them, even if they don't know the Lord, that somehow God will intervene. And I'd echo everything that Brett said. I think I'd also say pray for Brett. The Gospel Coalition is an amazing resource which touches many people. It has a huge readership. And so articles like the one that Brett wrote, potentially thousands and thousands of churches are going to be helped by that kind of resource. So pray for Brett and the Gospel Coalition and what they're doing for really effective communication, which helps strengthen the church at this time, because we need it. And if we can help each other in this way, that's terrific. Brett's helped so many of us with this post, and we're looking for more of that kind of input and contribution.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a long road ahead, but there's lots of hope, and we're all excited to meet together. I think I can say that on behalf of all of us. But yeah, Brett, it's been so good to get your thoughts. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you guys. That was fun.